Our old friend Matt Williams is at it again, guys. And today you are going to get a front row seat as I show you his latest criticism of our world champion Springboks, as well as Dr. Rassie Erasmus's hilarious response. As we know, guys, Matt Williams just cannot resist a dig at our box. And here he is on Irish media, where he was actually invited to talk about the British and Irish Lions.
So all things considered there, what you're saying about the Lions, overall, can the Lions be proud of the tour?
On field, absolutely. I mean, let's everyone's saying, let's go to South Africa. The South African tour was the worst tour, the worst games of international rugby I think I've ever seen. The way that both management teams, the off-field teams, conducted themselves was disgraceful. Rassie was running on the field as a water carrier. They were leaking videos about criticising referees, ringing people up. The style of rugby was an abomination. All they did was kick across field and chase. It was not played in a good spirit. I want to be aggressive, but no problem with aggression. But it wasn't played in a spirit of rugby.
So let's deal with what Matt is saying one thing at a time.
So all things considered there, what you're saying about the Lions, overall, can the Lions be proud of the tour?
On field, absolutely. I mean, let's everyone's saying, let's go to South Africa. The South African tour was the worst tour, the worst games of international rugby I think I've ever seen.
I just want to pause there quickly. Notice how he is asked about this Lions tour, and after just 1 second, he changes the topic to South Africa. There is so much that he could say about the 2025 Lions tour to Australia, but instead he switches the subject to us. That just confirms that this guy has the Springboks on his brain. As the saying goes, Rassie is in his head. Okay, let's go back to that clip.
The South African tour was the worst tour, the worst games of international rugby I think I've ever seen. The way that both management teams, the off-field teams, conducted themselves was disgraceful. Rassie was running on the field as a water carrier. They were leaking videos about criticising referees, ringing people up. The style of rugby was an abomination. All they did was kick across field and chase. It was not played in a good spirit. I want to be aggressive, but no problem with aggression. But it wasn't played in a spirit of rugby.
Now look, that is literally just his opinion, right? It was the worst that he had ever seen. Okay, fine, if he says so. I could even agree if he meant that literally. There were no fans in the stadiums, for example. So yes, visually, it was the worst Lions tour any of us had ever seen. But he then goes on to confirm what we all knew he meant from the start. I wonder if Williams is on record as describing the 2011 Rugby World Cup final as the worst rugby he'd ever seen. At least up until that point. I mean, that match was awful. Except for Thierry Dusartois. I can think of a few Scotland-Italy Six Nations wooden spoon matches that weren't exactly easy on the eye. And just to prove that I'm not biased, I was at Loftus when the Springboks beat the Wallabies in 2016, and that might actually be the least entertaining match I've ever attended. Now, here comes the important part. Do you think New Zealand cares what anyone thinks of the way they played in that 2011 Rugby World Cup final? Do you think the Scots care what we think after they beat the Italians to avoid the wooden spoon? And do you think Alistair Coetzee cared what anyone thought after we beat the Australians that night in Pretoria? Spoiler alert, no, none of them would have cared. I was actually in the press conference after that Springbok win over Australia, and Coetzee said that running rugby at international level is a fairy tale. Now look, I don't entirely agree with Alistair on that one, but he is mostly right. What style of rugby do most teams play, historically and traditionally? Do they attack gung-ho, or do they, at the very least, play the percentages? Put another way, they play to win. It's only really the All Blacks that play this beautiful running rugby stuff at international level on a consistent basis. Pretty much everyone else, at the very least, as I say, play the percentages. So if kick and chase is what brings about victory, then teams are going to kick and chase. Think of the box kicking strategy that helped us win the 2019 Rugby World Cup. And for our international friends, that wasn't actually all we did in Japan. You have to have more in your armory than that to actually win the tournament.
They come and losing it. Arms there, pops up in a toy. Here comes Cheslin Colby. Colby bounces towards the fence. Beats one, still going. Cheslin Colby. Cheslin Colby. South Africa. The World Cup is theirs.
Any excuse just to get that in, right? Now listen, Matt Williams also says the behaviour of the management was terrible in 2021, and he references Rassie's video, for example. Now look, I don't agree with what Rassie did, but you know what? Do you know what it did do? It worked, number one, so you could say that it was justified, but perhaps more importantly, it added drama and theatre to the series. Isn't that what we want? Isn't that exciting? Because let's be honest, let's say that the rugby was quote-unquote beautiful. Does that attract non-rugby fans to the game? I'm going to say no, because they don't know that there's this beautiful rugby being played that they could be watching. But if people at the office or at school or university or where in the streets, whatever it might be, if they are talking about this, i.e. Rassie and his video, people who otherwise would not be engaged hear about it, and they might become interested and they say, hey, you know what? I need to check this out. I'm going to give you a boxing example. About 10 years ago, Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao fought each other. Now, that is a fight that, quite frankly, happened at least 5 years too late, in my opinion. But there was so much hype created around that fight that people who ordinarily would not watch boxing tuned in to watch it. And then they were disappointed because it was a rather one-sided and boring bout, which, if you're a boxing fan, you would have been able to tell those people beforehand that that was almost certainly what kind of fight it was going to be. But the fact of the matter is, it was the hype around the fight that drew those new spectators in. Just like that Rassie Erasmus video was more likely to draw people in. So Williams can moan all day long about style and what he called an abomination. But I'm going to be honest with you guys, and I'm not just saying it because I'm making this video. I genuinely found that second test of that 2021 Lions series, the one we won 27-9, I found it incredibly absorbing. To me, it was edge of the seat stuff. The intensity and the tension was almost unbearable. It was one of the great arm wrestles in rugby in that first half. And then in the second half, we overwhelmed them. That will go down as one of my favourite test matches. Perhaps I'm just a rugby nerd and maybe you feel differently. Williams clearly does. But of all that stuff he said, I think it was to be expected. Until he dropped this beauty.
The Lions are the keepers of the law.
The Lions are the keepers of the law? What the actual F? I don't know about you guys, but I was always under the impression that World Rugby were the keepers of the law, or at the very least, the referees. To say the Lions are the keepers of the law is absolute hogwash. He says they are so special, and to a degree they are. I'm certainly not one of those in favour of doing away with the Lions. But the reality is that in the professional era, their tours are becoming less exciting, and you could say, by extension, less relevant. Certainly not more exciting. Despite what Matt Williams says, they tour every 4 years, rotating between South Africa, Australia and New Zealand. Just like in the old days, they face our provincial or franchise teams over a period of several weeks before the test series starts. The calibre of opposition they face in those tour matches is, quite frankly, weak. Most of those teams don't field their best sides. They rest their international stars. And why wouldn't they? Why would Rassie want to risk Eben Etzebeth getting injured against the Lions, playing for the Sharks, for example. So in that sense, Lions tours are actually quite farcical. It's only really once they get to the test series that it becomes exciting. For me, anyway. But to say they are the keepers of the law, what does that even mean? Was that maybe just a slip of the tongue by Williams? Because there's no way that they determine what is right and wrong, or gatekeep what can and cannot be done in this sport. And let's just finish with the rest of his clip.
The Lions are the keepers of the law. They are so special, and they've got to keep going. But to suggest that this Lions tour didn't restore this absolutely tarnished image of what it meant to play Lions rugby, I mean, it's just a fallacy. They came to Australia, and from the first second, Andy Farrell and his coaching staff, they made the Lions play a running game. They put the ball in hand. They took chances. That made errors because it's high-risk rugby. But, geez, it was entertaining. It was fabulous to watch. They weren't just doing bombs and chasing through and doing crossfield kicks. You know, there was a variety. People were counter-attacking. There was great attack from the back lines. There was great attack from the forwards. There was excellent ball carrying. There was ferocious defence. That's what we want. And it was entertaining and it was engaging. And a team full of internationals dominated the provincial games who didn't have any international players or a couple of old blokes left in it. But when it came to the test matches, we had a couple of proper test matches. So, yes, that was a successful tour. The Lions can be very proud that they take that trophy home. And they should, I think it's restored their image on the field.
They played a running game, he says. The Lions were entertaining and fabulous to watch, he says. He talks about their attacking prowess. Now, let me just interject there, okay? Because the reality is that all teams are now more attacking than they were 4, 5, 10 years ago. Why? Well, the likes of Jock Ninaber helped bring about the era of defensive superiority. You could say, even a decade before Ninaber, defences had already become so well organised that one of the only ways to negate them was the rush defence, which, as we South Africans know all too well, brought about a high percentage of intercept tries. Think Brian Abana and John de Villiers in those days. But what has happened now is that attacking coaches have found ways to negate the various defensive systems they come up against. It is a fact that in almost every top rugby league last season, more tries were scored than in any of the previous seasons. That tells you attacks have improved and now have the upper hand in many instances. The Springboks are a more enterprising team. We've seen the influence of Tony Brown, for example.
To the Springboks, looks to set Esterhuizen away, gets us past three to Edwards Bonamanda. Bonamanda cuts them open, sends it to Mapimpi turns on the afterburners and fires inside to Williams!
But also, if you watch carefully, you can see that one of the strategies attacks are using is to move the ball quickly and pass in a manner that to the untrained eye appears to be just throwing it around. Believe me, it's deliberate and calculated. What it does is it creates chaos in the defense and gives them less time to close down space and to regroup. With that in mind, you would not have needed clairvoyant powers to predict that this Lions series was going to feature more attacking play than the previous one. Matt also mentions the ferocious defense. Now, yes, that is still there. It's not like the attacks have suddenly started to overwhelm the defences. For example, most international defences cope very well with the pick and drives close to the try line. That is something that hasn't changed. I'm just saying the attacks are experiencing more success now than in the previous few seasons. Maybe even decade or even longer. And we have the data to back that up too. And yes, Williams is right. We did have a couple of proper test matches. I could be a bit of a moron and say the reason for that is because the Lions weren't as good as we expected them to be and the Wallabies were better than we anticipated. I, for one, call the 3-0 Lions series win, with Australia's only hope being a dead rubber third test win. But that's probably neither here nor there. Williams also says they restored their image on the field. I won't lie, I'm not sure they had an image to restore in the first place. Was their reputation really tarnished after their South Africa tour 4 years ago? If it was, I certainly didn't notice. For me, immediately after that tour ended, all the bad blood and bitterness, if there ever was any, was over. It was back to normal, and I was expecting another Lions series in 4 years' time, and hopefully a good one too. Just like now, it's over. In 4 years' time, there will be a new set of players. Yes, some will still be there, but it will be a different group, possibly with a different coach, and certainly a different opponent. I have nothing against the Lions. In fact, I quite like them. And I do look forward to their tours, especially their test series. And if there's a bit of needle between them and whoever they're playing against, then that's also cool. Rugby needs more stories like that, if you ask me. That's how you create excitement and interest, and ultimately, how you actually grow the game. I'd like to think Matt Williams knows that. But to find a way to bring us into this, and with such ease, is just another example of how this guy just can't keep us out of his head. And if you're still here, I've got that promised Rassie Erasmus response for you. On X, Doc posted a reply to a post about what Williams had to say. Rassie including a screenshot of the Australian's profile from a Google search. And there you go, folks. Matt Williams had a 17.65% winning record when in charge of Scotland, winning just 3 out of 17 tests, and 2 of those were against Japan and Samoa, both Tier 2 nations at the time. Now listen, I don't subscribe to the idea that if you didn't do something, then you aren't entitled to an opinion. If that were so, then none of us would ever be in any position to criticize the president, for example. But I do love what Doc did here, just putting Matt in his place. But what do you think? Do you agree it is no surprise whatsoever that he had another go at us without even being asked? Or do you think his reference to us and the 2021 series was justified? Let me know in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, why not help me out with a super thanks? That's the heart button with the $sign inside of it. You'll be able to make a highlighted comment. I'll hit the love button on your comment, and I promise to reply too. You'll also have the opportunity to make a small donation to my channel. It's whatever you want it to be. It can be 10 Rand or 10,000 Rand. The reason I'm asking for your help is because I would love to do this full time. I would also love to go to Australia in 2027 and cover the Rugby World Cup for you from down under with daily coverage. But I'll need your help to make it happen. Whatever you're willing to contribute, I'll be very, very grateful. And if you used to work at Eskom and you got a lacquer bonus, then I'm counting on you to do the right thing. If you're not yet ready to support me in that manner, you can also just crock roll the like button, and you can also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And just a few days ago, I recorded a video detailing how Zimbabwe qualified for the 2027 Rugby World Cup to take place in Matt Williams' home country, Australia. It includes an exclusive interview with their coach, Peter Bernardi. You can watch that video over here. And if you've already seen it, may I recommend this retro review of our 1995 Rugby World Cup heroes. Take a trip down memory lane with me on what was a very special time for our boys. And I'll see you next time.